Hello everybody, welcome back to the Lit and Lang Gang podcast. You find me alone today, Year 11, this is Miss Graham. I'm recording a very quick bonus episode for you, just so that I can go over some theory that you might find beneficial. So today I'm going to be talking to you very briefly about the Aristotle theory of the tragic hero. This can be applied most certainly to Macbeth. I think elements of it can be applied to other texts that you study, and of course if you go on to A-level then it's actually relevant for quite a few of the texts, and I hope you find it really useful.
Cracking conversation, analytical interpretation, and igniting imagination with the Lit and Lang Gang.
Okay, so Aristotle was a Greek philosopher who was writing about 350 BC, so he's writing before the birth of Christ, so we're talking over 2,000 years ago he's writing. And he comes up with this theory that in order for a hero of a play to be considered tragic, they must go through certain stages and certain things have to happen to them in order for them to fit his theory. Now you've got to remember he's writing from a time when he's going to be heavily influenced by the arts, literature, plays, traditional arts such as like fine art, because that's what the Greeks were often very famous for. They were famous for almost creating the arts. In fact, if you do drama or you are familiar with the theatre, then that picture or the symbol of the dramatic arts, which is the two faces, you've got the happy and the sad, that actually comes from this theory of Greek tragedy. And that's actually the chorus in a Greek tragedy, which we can talk about in later podcasts. But for the tragic hero, there are a few things that must happen. So, number one, our hero must be a person who is superior in all ways to the general populace of our play or of our story. They are usually psychologically, morally and politically stronger than the average person. Now, when you take this into account, I'm going to link this to Macbeth, and this podcast will be uploaded in the Macbeth section of the VLE, because when we think about Macbeth at the beginning of the play, he's definitely presented as superior. So he comes across as noble Macbeth, for well he earned that name. We get this idea that he's this amazing soldier, he's been incredible in battle, and therefore he is greater than others. However, the next stage is that our hero must have a small flaw in his character, one which we all have, which is particular circumstances lead to his downfall. Now, when I say that this is a flaw we must all have, I mean it's inside all of us, literally every one of you listening, me, myself, we all have this ability within us. In Macbeth's case, this is his ambition. We are all, to greater or lesser degrees, ambitious, but Macbeth's ambition is so great that it actually ends up leading to his downfall. Now, ambition is just one. You could argue it's his pride. You could argue that it is maybe someone like Scrooge isn't a tragic hero because he isn't greater than everyone else in the beginning. But, Scrooge is ignorant, and you might argue that is a fatal flaw. There are numerous different ways that you could look at it. It could be his lust for power that makes him have a downfall. But the Greek term we use for this is his hamartia, or hamartia, depending on your pronunciation. And that is what leads to it. So Macbeth, his ambition, his need for power, he's so great that it actually creates his death. It's almost like that is the reason for it. His next stage that they must go through is that this downfall must be due to excessive pride, which we call the hubris. He's doomed from the start. He bears no responsibility for possessing his flaw, but bears responsibility for his actions. So this means that ultimately, through the process of the play's progression, that's a wordy way of saying, across the course of the play, he starts to experience this downfall, and it's normally through excessive pride, and that would be what we call the hubris. The next stage is the fall of the hero must lead to catastrophe for the larger society for which he is part, but the result will be a restoration of order. In simple terms, the reversal of fortune is brought about by the hero's tragic flaw. This is what we call, in the Greek term, a peripetia. I think I'm saying that right. Essentially, the downfall of our hero, the gradual decline in their person, the gradual decline in their well-being, them, etc. and so forth, doesn't just affect them, it affects society, and it creates chaos. So when we think about Macbeth as an example, when he starts his downfall, he murders Duncan, he becomes king. Well, we know from Act 2, Scene 4, this actually causes an absolute catastrophe for Scotland. We know they're plunged into an eternal darkness. Duncan's horses turn on each other, they start eating themselves. We have the eagle and I think it's the sparrow off the top of my head, though I may have misquoted that. We have the two birds, the smaller is killed. the larger is killed by the smaller. I'll get there eventually. Which shows that Scotland is doomed. But it's not until the end of the play, when the tragic hero is killed, that actually restoration is restored for the entirety of Scotland, in this case, or the society in which they live. The next stage is only 2 more. The hero must discover and fear his own personal downfall, but not cower or lose his personal dignity in confronting it. Now, I always say this one wrong. This is their anagnorisis. Now, I think I've certainly said that wrong. Essentially, when they realise what they have done and the downfall they have taken, they are scared at it, but they don't cower and they don't back down. So, in Act 5, Scene 8, when Macbeth has been fighting in his castle and he's confronted with Macduff, and when Macduff informs him Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped, Macbeth is shocked by that fact, actually to a point where he says, I will not fight you. But when Macduff makes it very clear he will fight him anyway regardless, and he will put his head on a spike, Macbeth doesn't back down, and he says, lay on, Macduff, and be damned that first cried to him, hold enough, and I will not kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet. So he doesn't back down, and in many senses that's actually quite heroic. He's not redeemable by that point. Of course he's not. He can't say that Macbeth makes himself better. He can't be. However, he actually does become almost a little bit more respected in our eyes because he does die a noble death. And this is part of that tragic hero. Finally, and the last stage of Aristotle's theory, is that the audience must sympathise with the plight of the hero and consequently feel the emotions of pity and fear on behalf of the hero, thus purge them from their own minds and undergo, and there's the Greek term, and actually it's a Greek quotation, a catharsis of pity and fear. And essentially, the audience learn a moral message from the play. They experience the hero's downfall themselves, and they feel that pity and fear that the hero feels for themselves, and as a result, they're purged of the feelings that they too might have had, just like the hero. So, by watching Macbeth's downfall, we are purged of our over-excessive ambition. We are purged of our lust for power, because we see and we experience and feel, along with the character, everything that he went through, and we learn from it. Now, Aristotle actually said, a man cannot become a hero until he can see the root of his own downfall. And that's kind of the point of it. You might look at this and go, well, how is Macbeth a hero? He's not a hero. Well, he kind of is, in a sense, in the Aristotle sense, because he started as better. Yes, he takes a downfall. It's his own fault, undoubtedly, but we have all of this in us ourselves. He realises it and he doesn't cower at the end. He actually fights it. So you can definitely argue, don't think hero in terms of like Disney hero or anything like that. A hero in a Greek term is just someone who is noble and powerful. Well, Macbeth is that, and he is ultimately tragic and, kind of pitiable, I guess, in Aristotle's eyes. If you want to do any kind of wider reading around this, some of you I know might be looking towards the A level perhaps. This theory is 100% relevant for Othello as well. Othello goes through all of these stages as well. You might have a look at, Romeo and Juliet. Are they tragic heroes? They experience desire and lust and love, something that's inside all of us. So have a little look at that wider text, because Shakespeare's obviously heavily influenced by this. It comes up time and time again in his work that, we can apply the tragic hero. We can apply the tragic hero. We can apply the tragic hero. You see it comes up a lot. So some wider text you might even look at outside of that. Richard III, you can experience this. King Lear, Hamlet, it's there through all of it. Okay, so hopefully you found that. I'm just trying to get a little bit together for you, just a little bonus episode that I'm going to upload this evening for you, just so that you can revise a little bit of some higher level context, because that's where you'd get marks for this. It's on the context section where it says show an understanding of the relationships between texts and the context in which they were written. Well, Shakespeare would certainly have been inspired by this. So if you want to push that context just into that slightly more thoughtful bracket, then you might find this useful. If you've got any questions about it, please don't hesitate to pop by and see me. I love talking about Shakespeare, so I'll always be happy to chat it through with you. There's tons of stuff on the internet if you want to check the spellings of some of those Greek terms, because they are quite hard in some cases, and I hope you find this useful. Thanks for listening, guys.